You are listening to the Midweek Redemption Podcast, a resource from Redemption City Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. For more information about our church, please visit our website at redemptiongr.org.
Hello, Redemption City Church. My name is Josh Ford, and it's great to be with you today. Today we have a special treat of hearing from Jamie Bartlett, kind of the matriarch of Redemption City. Is that official on your business card?
It should be. It totally should be, yes.
But Jamie, thanks for being here with us.
Of course. Yeah, happy to be here. Yeah.
Or letting me crash your house.
Yes. Yeah, you guys. So the plan was that Josh and I would have this quiet interview.
In the office.
In the office, right. I had it all envisioned in my mind, and yet we are here at our house, sitting outside, because our sixth grader, Jonathan, his class is remote learning for the next couple weeks because of a COVID situation, and so he's fine. And he also has a friend over, so we figured we would pivot, and now we're sitting outside because it's quieter out here than inside with two sixth grade boys.
There might be some construction noise.
Yeah, there's going to be some construction noise.
Bernie might bark. Yep. This is all about, just real life.
You guys are going to get real life. Yeah, like you're sitting in our backyard with us.
Yes.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
But, it's not too shabby. The sun's shining. We got some, what is this, caramel chai tea?
Caramel chai tea.
We're sipping on.
Yep.
It's pretty nice.
No complaints.
Well, the interview format that we're experimenting with is a 3-2-1 interview, which is meant to just be, a way to get to know your story, some of the highlights, meaningful moments, without having to start like way back at the beginning.
Right, yeah.
Talk about your kindergarten teacher and all that. Unless that's one of your,
My mom was the kindergarten teacher.
Oh, okay.
She was not mine, but she was right across the hall. So
okay, interesting.
I would get her angry glares if during recess there were any complaints. Yeah, close enough to try to keep me in line. Yeah. Yes. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the 3-2-1 is 3 people, 2 locations, and one experience that like most shaped you for good or ill.
Sure.
And kind of made you the person that you are today. You can start anywhere in there.
Anywhere in there?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was glad that you texted me a couple weeks ago with the format.
Yes.
Because I'm like, how do I narrow down? I just turned 40. So narrow down 40 years of life into these categories. So I was really thankful for just a couple weeks to kind of mull it over in my mind. And so I'll start in just the order, the 3-2-1.
Okay.
So the 3 people that have most impacted me, I couldn't actually narrow it down to 3. I have 3 categories. So I did what I could.
Love it. Okay.
But actually the first one is single, is one person, and that's Mike, my husband. We'll be year 16 in February. Wow. And I just look back to like the person I was when we first got married, and I just see so much growth, like in my own life.
Wow.
And he has been a huge part of that. Mm-hmm. He has been just a very constant encouragement to me and challenger to me, and just a sweet partner to have along for the ride. So he has by far, hands down, number one in my life. I'm so just thankful for him. And I even I wrote down his name, and I wrote down this Tim Keller quote, which will totally geek him out because he loves Tim Keller.
That's a great way to...
But Tim Keller has this quote where he says, "Friendship is a deep oneness that develops when 2 people speaking the truth in love journey together to the same horizon." When I read that, that's so that's what I picture in my mind. Like Mike and I walking hand in hand towards heaven, like just being each other's cheerleaders. And not always. I mean, we also can fight like no other. But I also see that as a good thing, you know, that we can duke it out and work through it and love each other more because of it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So
is there any as you think about like your 16 years, is there like a season or a situation where you feel like this was like a particularly shaping or
for sure moment? There's a couple. The one that sticks out mostly in my mind, we had been married only a few months. So newly married, and I just wanted out. boom, I want to hit eject. I'm like, this marriage sucks.
What have we done?
What in the world have we done? Can we annul this thing?
Right,
we were butting heads over everything. And I called my dad. We were living in Pennsylvania at the time. And I called my dad in Michigan. And I was like, I think I'm going to get a one-way ticket home. And he was like, heck no, you're not. And he was like, you made a vow, like, for better or worse, and you are not coming home. And I was like, let me talk to Mom, because she would have been like, oh yeah, come on home.
Good cop, bad cop.
Good cop, bad cop. Yes. Yeah, but he talked me through it. He's like, it's meant to be hard, and that will be for your good.
Wow.
It doesn't feel like it right now, but it'll be for your good. And so, you're not coming home. Toughen up, Buttercup. Like, you're in this. And that was really impactful to me, to be like, okay, eject is not an option. Mm-hmm. Like, to get out of this is not an option. Mm-hmm. And so, Mike, you and I, like, we're in this for life. Yes. And so, there have been lots of moments like that. We moved to Florida, Mike and I did, he had a youth ministry job down there. And it was 4 years of pretty isolated. We didn't have a lot of community. We didn't have a lot of good friendships down there. We were very far from both of our families.
Yeah.
And I remember in that first year being like, I don't like this at all. Yeah. But it was like, okay, we're either going to sink or swim. Like, it's you and me. And while that's not ideal, God can still do things in this season. And we left after 4 years in Florida just much stronger. We had 2 babies, like, in that time frame. And just, like, I think we learned to work together. Like, we are joined, and this is the season we're in, and it's hard, but how can we grow in this? And so that was really formative. It was really hard, but I'm really thankful for just that time, because it did allow us to grow together a lot and develop a deep foundation, I think. Like, we didn't go home for holidays. It was just him and I. And it's like, well, and I remember Mike saying one year, like, this is where we start developing our own family, like, traditions and what do we want these to look like for our family. And while I did not picture Christmas with Santa Claus in Bermuda shorts walking the beach, I was like, well, I guess we may as well embrace this while we're here, So it was just a fun but hard season of navigating that and building our own family identity. And it was good. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I have
it's cool to just, like, hear you say that, like, 3 months in, eject, to, like, best friends walking towards heaven together.
Right.
It's just
and I never would have, thought that we would, that I would say that. It was like, okay, we're together, but I'll probably hate you for the rest of my life, but then I think just catching a vision for just marriage, and that, like, we chisel each other's edges and we push each other, and we are helping, I think, C.S. Lewis, like, becoming our future glory selves. He has this thing, like, marriage, you're becoming your future glory selves, and the other person has the opportunity to participate in that process.
That's so good.
And I just, like, a lot of those things have just been really foundational truths for me to latch onto, and to enjoy being married, and to look forward to the next however long we have to be walking hand in hand, like, just as a sweet gift. So he also annoys me very much. And so, but it's like that, like, life on life, like, we're here to help each other, and it's been really good. So each year gets better. So
that's great. Good word for everybody.
Yeah. And then the second, so this is where I moved to categories. The second one is my parents. Like, they are, they go together. Yeah. I have the good cop, bad cop. My dad actually was a cop, police officer for Grand Rapids. Yeah. And so he just had a lot to teach me about just faithfulness. He worked the same job for 33 years until he retired, and lots of hard shifts, overnights, and, evenings, and all the things. And so, so he taught me a lot. He was also not around a lot, because that was a really demanding job. And so I missed him, but I always had a respect for him, just for what he did. He would show up to some of my volleyball games in full cop gear and his cop car, and there was just something, bulletproof vest. Well, actually, he would never wear a bulletproof vest. Right? I'm crazy. My mom was like, I tried to get him to wear a bulletproof vest. My dad is like, why? If God wants me to die, I'm going to die. Like,
respect.
Right. It's not in the bulletproof vest, it'll be a bullet to the head, I was like, all right. So I think I learned a lot for him too about trust. Like, he's putting himself in these situations, and he doesn't know what the outcome's going to be, and you know, he also, having my dad as a police officer got me out of a few speeding tickets.
Oh, okay,
so,
nice.
you know, I like to have that one.
Yeah.
Sometimes it wouldn't, and they would, like, write me, like, double or whatever, you know, like, full punishment, like, for you trying to use your dad as an excuse. But it did help me get out of a couple, so that was good.
Yeah.
And then my mom was a teacher in the school district that I went to, and she and I butted heads a lot more. But I think I've recognized, especially as an adult, that, like, she prayed for me more than anybody else in my life and continues to. And so I think for her, I've learned a lot from her just about surrendering, like she had to surrender me over and over to the Lord because there wasn't a whole lot she could do to control me. And so, yeah, I think the two of them and just, having them around to invest in our kids has been really sweet. My parents and I had a really hard relationship, so it has healed a lot over the years, but it was really hard. And they talk about it too. It was like the hardest years of their life and mine. So
like the teenage years?
Yeah, I would say probably from 5th grade until I was a sophomore in college was just really rough. I rebelled in a lot of ways, and their faith at that time, which they would see now, was a lot of legalism, and so just a lot of, like, I didn't want anything to do with Christianity because it was all just like nothing was explained to me. It was just like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do that, you know. And there was nothing in me that was drawn to that. So that caused a lot of problems for a long time. There's still some deep wounds, I think, from on my end to my parents and theirs from mine. I did some really hurtful things. But I think God has been gracious and just helping us kind of move past it and heal from it. So it's a work in progress, but I'm still so thankful to them. They stuck with me through a lot of really hard things. So they're my number 2 and my number 3. I just have this, like, category of, like, Redemption City women, like, and that includes a lot of different people. But I feel like they've been really sweet relationships to me, just helping me even, like, understand the gospel. Like, it wasn't until we started the church plant that I would say I had my, like, quote, gospel awakening. I was a Christian, but I didn't really understand. Mike and I got married when I'd only been a Christian for maybe a year and a half, so I was very young in my faith, and still was working out the kinks of what it looked like and what it meant for me, and like, just the women that I've been able to, like, you know, walk alongside of these last 9 years, whatever, at the church have had huge impacts on my life. I think of many conversations with Christy Voss and Sarah Holderbaum and Kirsten Martin, and just, like, out of the depths of my sin, like, learning from them, like, grace and what walking in our true identity as followers of Christ looks like. And so they've been huge part of just my story. So those are my people. I also listen to a lot of podcasts. I read a lot of books, but, like, most influential are the people that are, like, in my life, you know? I love podcasts and can learn a lot from those too, but I think the day in, day out, just relationships are the most formative for me.
Awesome.
So.
That's great.
Yeah. So there's that. Those are, all my people. And now I had a much harder time with the 2 places. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I just see so many places. I can picture so many in my head. But I was almost hesitant to talk about the first one because it does bring up a lot of, like, pain in my heart. It's pretty heavy. But also, I think, set the trajectory for the first 21 years of my life. Like, it was just, really hard. So I alluded a little bit to just, like, my parents and I not getting along well. I just had a really hard heart. I was really stubborn, very drawn to rebellion and all of the things. But I think what really set me down just a path of, like, brokenness was a relationship that I got into with an older boy. I was, like, 13, and he was almost 18, so significantly older than me. He was in foster care, so he had just a really broken story. You know, no one was talking about Enneagram at the time or all of that, but I see so clearly now that was my, like, number 2 helper, coming alive. You know, I saw this boy, he was really cute, and I also wanted to help him and, like, be the person that saved him from, like, the mess of his life. But as a 13-year-old, that just doesn't go well. I didn't have the maturity to like get in a situation like that. He was really broken in a lot of ways, a lot of sexual abuse in his family done against him, and then just really messed up. But I was drawn to him like a moth to a flame.
Yes.
And so there was one night he asked to come over to my house, and he's like, you can sneak me in through the basement window. And I was like, okay, that sounds great. 13, I didn't know anything really.
Yes.
I was still very, very young. I mean, I'd watched Beverly Hills 90210, which I don't know if that's before your time, but like I knew some things about just relationships and all of that, but I didn't know a lot of things, and sadly learned a lot of things that night in really, really unhealthy, unhelpful, destructive ways. Like I just think that like a part of me really died that night. Like I didn't understand what was happening. Obviously, like there was sex involved. My first experience with it, and it was horrible. It was just awful. And I remember the next day we were going. My 7th grade class trip was to Michigan Adventure, which is like the amusement park.
Yes.
And so
that was the next day.
That was the next day.
Yeah.
I'm like 7th grade. I was going to Michigan Adventure, and the night before I had just had this horrific experience.
Yes.
But I remember telling a few of my friends because I couldn't go on the water. Like on the water rides, because I was bleeding.
Yes.
And I told a few of them, I think as like a help me process this. Like, what in the heck just happened? And they were like, whoa, that's so cool. You're like the first one to like lose their virginity and tell us all about it. And I think I like tried to like even glorify it in my like retelling of it to make it sound less painful than what it was. And so I think that it just set me on this like path of like a really just hard place. I was like, either this will crush me or I'm just going to get hard in my heart and just keep moving forward. So I stayed in the relationship, and he was just horrible. Like everything, there was nothing good about this guy. But it continued until I was a senior in high school.
Wow.
So just lots of abuse in a lot of ways. There was sexual, of course, and then emotional, verbal, physical. Like it got physical at the end, like hitting and all of that. And the hard thing was my parents knew, and they just didn't know what to do. They had tried to get me to stop seeing him, but I was so manipulated by that point that like he said if I ever left him, he would kill himself. Just so like I just felt so stuck. And I had a lot of bitterness, I think, in my own heart, like, towards God. Like, God didn't protect me. My parents didn't protect me. Screw them and screw God. I want nothing to do with it. So I drank a lot. I smoked a lot of weed. Like, just did all of it. But never really got in trouble because I was in a privileged position. I had 2 middle-class parents that, would get me out of a lot of trouble if I ever got into it. But a part of me was really mad because I wanted to feel pain, and I don't know, it was just a really hard season for me. So finally, my senior year of high school, this guy got arrested and sent to prison. Not for anything that he did to me, though that would have certainly counted because I was so young when he was so much older. But he went away for grand theft auto for a few years, and he did probably the kindest thing he ever did to me, and he wrote me a letter from prison saying, I don't ever want to talk to you again. Like, I have hurt you in so many ways, and you need to move on from me. And I cried and cried because I couldn't imagine my life without him. And then I felt this liberation of like, oh my word, okay, like the hardest years of my life are over. And so I did start to heal, I think, my senior year, but in very pagan ways, I would say. Like, my parents describe it as I started to make better bad choices. So I was not doing quite the same things as I was with him, because he got me into stealing, like shoplifting, like I was doing so much stuff. I stopped doing some of those things, and I started hanging out with better bad friends. Not Christians, but like not criminals. So I mean, that helped. And so my relationship with my parents started to repair a little bit after that relationship ended, but I was still just really messed up in really dark places. And so getting back to my 2 places, so the first place I had was my parents' basement, because I think that was just where a lot of my a lot of things got taken from me.
Yeah.
And now I look and think that, like, our son Jonathan is almost 13. Like, what in the world? Like, I didn't have the terms for it at the time of, like, child abuse or rape. Like, I didn't even know. Now looking back on it, I'm like, I was a baby. Like, so young and just set on this really hard path. Yes. So the first place was my parents' basement, which is a harder thing for me to talk about and remember, but also a part of my story.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure. And then the second place happened when I was in college. So I was 21. I was engaged at the time, living with my fiance on the west side, not far from your house right now. And still very broken, though. Like, I didn't know healthy relationships. I didn't know anything. So I was still really broken. I remember, like, just doing things just to hurt him to get reactions and kind of all that. I was cheating on him multiple times. I was engaged to another guy. Like, it's all just such a mess. But I think I was still, like, hurting a lot, even though on the outward part I looked more together. I was still a mess. And so I was living with him over on the west side, and I found out I had cervical cancer. Just through, like, a routine thing. But I got this phone call, like, this is serious. You have cervical cancer, and we need you to come back into the office. And I was like, oh, my word. Like, the first time that, like, my, like, things seemed to falter a little bit. Like, I didn't have control over my life. I think before that, I had always thought I had some level of, even though I didn't, you have this false idea that you can control the way things go. Especially in college, I felt like I tried to do a lot of things to make my life look good and be good and feel good. And so in that, I started to just, I think, realize how shallow my life was, how I just didn't have any handlebars to help me in hard moments like that. And so I started thinking about God more. And I remember, like, I was going into a bar downtown with a bunch of my friends, and someone handed me a tract, like one of those, like, old school, like, Romans Road or whatever it is. And I threw it on the ground right in front of the person and looked right at him, and I said, I will never become a Christian, ever. Wow. And, like, no. And I walked inside, and I remember, like, sitting there drinking with my friends being like, maybe what is that all about? Maybe I should start thinking about that again, you know? And I think in that, like, just started in my mind, like, who is God anyways? And, like, I'm struggling with this, like, cancer, and I don't know what this all means, and just started thinking more about God. And I remember saying, okay, God, if you're real, like, prove it to me. Like, you know, in, like, a fist kind of to the air kind of way. Like, prove to me that you're real. And so because of the cervical cancer, I had to go in for, like, surgery, like a procedure, and I was really scared. I'd broken up with the fiance at that time because I was just a mess. Like, he was like, you're irrational. Like, I was like, you're right, I'm a mess. And so he was like, this is too much. So we had broken up. I was living back at home with my parents, which is a really, you know, humiliating place to be when you have moved out for 5 years or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're back. So I had to go for this procedure, and the nurse that was next to me, she's like, how are you feeling? And I was like, I'm really scared. And she grabbed my hand, and she prayed for me, and she sang, great is thy faithfulness, like, throughout the whole procedure. And I just lost it. Oh, my goodness. Ugly cry. Like, felt the presence of God, like, with me. And oh, my goodness. It was just really, I think, for me, and, like, an awakening to God. Like, he was doing a work in my heart in that moment. And so I have my second place is the doctor's office while I was there, and just being like, okay, God, maybe you are real, and maybe you are trustworthy, you know, and maybe I can trust you with my broken, messed up life. And it was not immediate. I wouldn't say I became a Christian then. But because my life didn't really start to change for several months after that. But there was this awareness of the presence of God that I just hadn't ever felt before or experienced before. So in that, I started going back to church. And my parents had switched churches while I was gone. And so they were like, why don't you just start coming back to church? Because that was always their thing. Like, just come back to church. Like, that will solve all my problems. Right. But in this case, like, I started going back to church. And just the pastor at their church just spoke a lot about grace and like what it really meant, and it wasn't legalistic. It was refreshing. And I just thought, like, this is what I need. Like, and so in that, like, became a Christian, got baptized. Like, my parents sat in the front row and just bawled their eyes out as I got baptized, and my older brother did too.
Wow.
So just kind of, God just did a redemptive work in my family in a year's time. And that was just really sweet. So my two places, my parents' basement, I feel like was my road to brokenness, and then that doctor's office was like the road to redemption, you know? And so,
That's awesome.
Yeah, so those are my places. Many more, I think of so many more, but if I were to say the two, those are my two.
Yeah.
And then the one experience. This one was also hard for me to like narrow down and then really think about like what has shaped me the most, you know, since all of that, since my two places.
Yeah. What
has shaped me the most? And I just thought about my time a little over 5 years ago where we lost a baby. I was pregnant, unexpectedly pregnant, because we had 4, you know, and then we were done.
Yes.
And then I remember being like, I know this feeling. Like, like, what is happening? And so I told Mike, I was like, I think there's another one coming. And he was like, oh my word. Like, are you serious?
Yes.
And I took a pregnancy test, and sure enough, I was pregnant again. And so we went from this like shock, like, well, we were actually trying to prevent that from happening. Apparently not well, you know, to like, okay, like, we can pivot, you know, like another baby, even though Jonathan at that point was only 5. I mean, so we had 4 kids under 5, and, you know, but we were like, okay, Lord, we will gladly embrace this baby. And I had a very like normal pregnancy right up until about the halfway mark. And the crazy thing was I had a good friend who was also surprised, like had a surprise pregnancy with their 5th. And about a month before anything happened with me, she lost her baby. And I remember thinking to my head, like, God, I'm so glad that I have not had to walk through that, because I think I would lose my faith. Like, I don't think I would come out the other side of that. That would do me in, which it did actually to her, was her like, nope, I don't want anything to do with God if he's going to take away my baby. And I remember thinking, like, that will happen to me. Like, if I ever had to walk through that, like, Lord, so I'm so glad that you have never put me in that position, because I wouldn't make it out. And so I went to the doctor just for my routine 18-week or whatever it was appointment, and they couldn't find the heartbeat.
Oh my gosh.
And so they're like, oh, it's not a big deal. I'm new. I'm like, let me just go get the doctor. And the doctor listened for the heartbeat. He couldn't hear anything. He's like, well, let's do it internal, because I'm probably wrong and the baby's probably fine. You know, all the things that they say to a mom who's about to lose her mind. And I remember like seeing the baby on the screen, and the baby was not moving. And I was like, oh my word, like, this is happening. And I just felt like almost like an out-of-body experience. Like, they're like, do you have anybody with you? And I said, no. And we're going to call your husband. And he came, and I felt so numb. I don't know. I don't even remember if I was crying. Like, I think I was just in shock, because they were going through all of the, you've got this option. Either you can wait and your body will miscarry at some point, but you'll have to be in the hospital because you're halfway through your pregnancy, so the baby's large enough where you have to deliver. Or we can induce, like, all of these things. And I was like, I have no idea. Like, we were supposed to, it was Labor Day weekend, we were supposed to go away, like, as a family, get away, and I just couldn't, like, I don't know, I just couldn't even, like, think about it in the moment. So Mike came, and I think over the next couple days, I was really wrestling, but my prayer was like, Lord, keep my heart soft, like, which in a way was hard to pray, because I knew it would make me feel it, you know, like, the hardening of my heart would probably have been easier and more, less painful, like, give me bitterness, give me like a hardness to this, and a hardness to you, God, like, because that'll make it easier for me to go through. But my prayer on the flip side was like, keep me tender, like, help me feel this, because I don't want to cut God out of my life, you know?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
So it led to, like, some really hard nights of, like, not sleeping, like, crying a lot, like, really, like, just grieving. I was really sad, but I was like, God, like, sustain me. Like, you say that you hold me, that you intercede for me, like, do those things because I will walk away. Like, and so we ended up, like, we went into the hospital, we delivered the baby. It was a little boy. So we got to hold him, and we were going to name him Noah. So I was like, well, let's just keep with that, like, because that name meant rest, or means rest. And it's like, okay, like, he is with you, God. Like, there's a really hard part of that. But God sustained me. Like, I remember, like, it wasn't immediate where I felt joy, because that's, you just don't feel that in the midst of grieving. But, like, I just remember thinking, like, he's sustaining me. Like, there was a period of probably at least a month after that where I slept in the boys' bedrooms with them because I was so scared that he would take one of them. I was just filled with anxiety after that. Like, oh my word, like, he's going to start taking these kids away, like, to show me that I have them as idols or something, like, to teach me a lesson, or I was just filled with all these, like, lies about God as our Father and what his heart is with suffering, and I was like, oh no, he's going to take them, like, he's going to really use this to, you know, break me down. And so I slept in their rooms until I was, and I didn't tell anybody that. Mike knew, but he was just like, well, I don't know, maybe this is part of her grieving, like, you know, I didn't really tell him the why I was sleeping in there with them, but it was just from anxiety. And then just being confronted with that one night, like, almost God saying, like, are you going to trust me, or are you going to live the rest of your life in anxiety? Like, you need to be open hands with, like, everything in your life, and do you believe that I am trustworthy? And I was like, just wrestled with that, and then I was like, yeah, I want to live like that. I want to live like I actually believe he's real. And so stopped sleeping in their room. Got rid of the baby monitors, because after that I was like, well, I won't sleep in the room, but I'll have the baby monitors, so if one of them gasps during the night, I will hear it, you know? And then it was like, nope, I got to get rid of the baby monitors, like, and just really live like he's real, and teach them to live like he's real, you know? So that was my experience. That was the most impactful, I think, just losing him and just setting my life more on a trajectory of, like, really wanting to live like I believe the truths of Scripture are real. And so, I think that's been great. Like, has opened me up to, like, wanting to take more risks, and, like, why not? What do we have to lose? Right. You know, like, if God is for us, like, let's live like it. And so that's been really good for me, and good for me to, like, over and over again trust him with our kids, with my family, with, you know, just kind of all of it, that he is trustworthy no matter what happens. So just a fresh kind of experience of that was, like, last week Jonathan shared that he's been bullied at school, and, like, came out of school crying, and like, my first initial, like, mama instincts are to, like, hold him close and say, screw school, stay home, you know, like, just don't.
And also,
even
what's his name?
Right. Well, I did that. I got there. I was like, what does he look like? Tell me his description.
What are his biggest fears?
Right. I know, right? Is he afraid of torture? Because good, it's coming, you know. But, like, to teach him, like, revenge, or, like, stay home and avoid hard things. But in that moment, like, really felt like just the Spirit of God, like, this is where you equip. Like, you don't teach him to escape, you equip him. And I was like, Jonathan, I looked in his eyes, I was like, this is a time where you either learn to live into your identity as a follower of Christ and a child of his, or you're gonna, like, be thrown around by everybody's opinions of you. And he would just look to me, he was like, Mom, that was really good. I was like, right, because you are not a victim to this. Like, you know, you have a choice in all of this. Is bullying right? No. But your response, like, who are you going to believe? Like, God or this kid? And I just saw him, like, kind of rise up to that, you know? And so...
What a cool moment.
It was really cool. And I think just evidence of growth in my heart to be like, God, he's your... Like, Jonathan is yours. And you will use hard things to, like, shape him and mold him. And I cannot protect him from those as much as I want to. It's not good for him. And so... I was just, freshly thankful. And certainly we had lots of conversations with the school and, you know, all of those things. But, like... My just that, like, initial, like, nope, this is an identity issue for you, and you've got to start living into being a child of God, and good reminders for me, too. Like,
that's great.
Yeah.
Being able to, it's just hearing your story, what sticks out to me is, like, starting from, like, the beginning of, like, I'm going to, like, try to help save this guy when you're 13, like, you're a dynamo, like, you engage, you, like, handle it,
Right.
And so with the experience you shared, like, I was really struck by how you're like, God, you got to sustain me. God, you got to keep my heart soft, like, that kind of vulnerability, and then, like, playing that out practically with, like, these are, you got to take care of you got to protect my kids ultimately.
Right. It's been a good lesson as an Enneagram too, to be like, there are situations that I cannot help in, nor should I try.
Yeah.
And there's a big freedom that comes from that knowing that I have a big God who never grows weary, who never sleeps, who is the best helper.
Yes.
And I don't have to be that.
Yeah.
Like, I can step into the areas he's called me to, but I also step back from the places he's called me not to be at. And that is a lesson I will continue to learn as I watch our kids drive away in cars on their own. I'm like, oh my word. Yeah. We'll reach new levels of that, but I'm just thankful for his work, because I would never have come to these places on my own.
Yeah.
I would be, a really not nice mom if I didn't have just the Spirit. I probably wouldn't even be a mom at all, because kids are a lot of work. And I knew that early on. I'm like, oh my word, I don't ever want to be a mom. I did enough babysitting to know that they just required way more self-sacrifice than I cared to do.
Yeah.
But just thankful for just kind of redemption in my own heart and vision for what he has for my life, and open hands.
That's so good. So. And I also really appreciate how you fleshed out how, like, living like God is in control, like, looked really practically, like going back to your own bed and turning off the monitor,
right?
And, talking to Jonathan, just like, even if you're struggling to believe it, you can still act like it's true.
Right, yeah. I think of the prayer often of the dad who brings his, like, child to Jesus, right? And it's like, Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief. Like, I'm living in tension here, but I want you to be stronger, God, so I'm going to move forward.
Yeah.
And so, it always has actions. Like, it's a heart issue, but then it works out in real life situations. So
good. Yeah. I think that's so helpful.
Yeah.
Well, I've kind of been asking folks, kind of at the end, just like a bonus round.
Unscripted bonus round.
Unscripted bonus round.
All right.
I'm just curious if you're a little bit further along than probably most moms in our church in the motherhood journey. Do you have any encouragements or thoughts that you'd like the other moms in our church or moms to be?
Sure. Yeah. Like, when you're in the thick of motherhood and just the demanding, exhausting phase, I think it can get lost that you are, like, discipling image bearers, right? Like, you are in the midst of all the diaper changes and the nursing and, like, all of it, preaching the gospel to these kids, like, through your acts of service to them and through just the laying down of your desires a lot. Like, I don't want to serve this kid right now. And yet, like, I don't think I would have grown like I have experienced without those moments of like, I'm not the most important person in this kingdom. Like, God is, and right now He is asking me to help this kid with what they have, and it's sanctifying, and there's nothing sexy about it because you're covered in, like, spit up and all the things, but there's such a heart work that He does in the midst of it. And we're just in 12 years of parenting, so there's some that are, further ahead than I am, but I think where I'm at is that He is faithful in the mundaneness of it all, and He uses it for our good, like, to just really give us hearts to serve and to love, and that He can be experienced in all of those moments, the hardest ones. Like, He's present. And I think a lot of Lamentations, which is an odd place to go, like, for motherhood, but it's like in the midst of, like, all this really hard, like, and there's no doubt about it that motherhood is hard and exhausting, and you can lament the hardness of it, but I love how He pivots and says, like, but this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope that the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. You know, just that whole part, like, his mercies are new every morning. That's like every morning of motherhood, his mercies are new. And I can either wake up with that in my head, or the, like, I can't believe I'm up this early because of this bratty kid, you know? It changes the trajectory of the way that I approach my kids. Like, I can. But this I call to mind. It reminds me that there's work involved, and, like, I have to call this to mind. It's not naturally gonna just come to me. Right. It's like I have to call it to mind. That, like,
attention on it.
So that's my advice. Like, I've always thought, like, I've enjoyed motherhood for the most part, but I'm like, I like this season. I don't know if I'm gonna like the next. And, like, here I am in the middle school boys and middle school and younger, and it's so good. It's so good. I think just to, like, start to see some of the, like, seeds that you've sown, like, start working out in their fruit, working out in their hearts. And I just think back to, like, when I was in 6th grade, 7th grade, I didn't have anybody like a mature Christian to talk to. And so I'm like, how can I be that for not only my own kids, but like also the other kids in the church that are coming up, or Jonathan's friend that's over right now. Like,
see them as people.
See them as people, and like discipleship, like all of it. So
that's so good.
That God's faithfulness continues. Like,
well, both, it's like discipleship, both for your own discipleship, and then just that, like, gospel ministry is not, like, somewhere else, you know, like, it's not outside your home. I mean, it is, but it's also, like right in your daily grind with your own kids. Like,
absolutely,
it's not like junior varsity ministry work.
I don't remember where I heard it, but, like, I think it was Gloria Furman has a lot of stuff on, like, motherhood, and she's like, your home is like your mission outpost. Like, you're not just there doing, like, I mean, you are there doing minuscule things, but in all of that, you are, like, building the kingdom in your own home, and just using your home as an outpost. And I just really resonated with that. Like, okay, that's really good. That means that I'm open with my home, and whoever is here, I love that.
Johnny, my son, appreciates your Hot Wheel car ministry.
Having the mini Hot Wheel cars. Like, I think that was after reading that, like, quote, I was like, Mike, we need to become foster parents. Like, this is meant to be, like, shared, not just for our own kids to benefit from, but also for kids that don't have this. Like, we can open up our home and really see it as a ministry to them too. So, I don't always like the, like, hard parts that come with having a home, like the cleaning, the endless cleaning and pickup, but I'm like, Lord, like, you can use this to, you know, in my own heart, my sanctification, and also to bless other people. So I see it as just a really wonderful kingdom building place, as messy as it is most of the time.
I think that is a true assessment of my experience of your hospitality.
Oh, thank you.
I've been blessed by it. We've all been blessed by it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a joy. It really is.
Great. Well, I think there's just some gold here. I'm excited to share this with the church. So thank you so much for your transparency and just testifying to God's goodness and hard stuff. So.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I've listened to all the podcasts and have very much enjoyed them. So thank you for your work and putting them together and sitting down with our people. So
it's been a privilege.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh.
Well, thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you on the next episode.